Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our third annual Black History Month celebration. I'm Kelly Khatib, Chair of S.U.R.E Diversity. S.U.R.E stands for Swampscott Unites, Respects, and Embraces Diversity. We are a volunteer community organization that works to encourage, educate, and collaborate in building a welcoming, nurturing, respectful, and inclusive community. Since 2016, we have done educational and community events to help our fellow residents experience and understand diversity. We've sponsored workshops, seminars, cultural festivals, and other activities to help people learn about their culture and different cultures. And we emphasize that diversity is more than race and ethnicity, sex and gender, age and disability. It includes the numerous characteristics that we share in common, as well as those that make us unique, such as values, socioeconomic status, and culture. You can learn more about S.U.R.E on our website, suarediversity.org, or visit the table in the atrium. We seek members and welcome your contributions. We have an amazing evening of music, poetry, and history to celebrate Black History Month. The theme is Black history is our history. All of us, our history. It is the history of America, an essential part of this multicultural fabric that makes this nation great. Whether your ancestors come from Europe, Asia, Africa, or the Americas, it is our combined composite story that makes American history our history. Since the story of people of African descent has been suppressed for so long, a specific time, the month of February, is designated to give it emphasis. As we become more familiar and more united, Black history will be soon felt as our history, our story, American history. We would like to thank our sponsors, the Town of Swampscott, Justice for All from the Shirat Hayam, and the First Church in Swampscott as well. Many people make this event possible. In the spirit of equity, I won't name them all. You are all special, you know who you are, and we thank you. We are fortunate to have some special people here in the audience from our town. I believe we have Rep. Jenny Armini here, if she can stand. We also have the Select Board, if you could stand so that you may be acknowledged. Thank you. I want to thank all the students here tonight and your families. We hope tonight's experience will help you better understand history and inspire you to learn more. One person who was essential in making this evening possible is Emily Zotto, Vice Principal of Swampscott Middle School. I'd like her to say a few words and introduce the next segment. Emily?
Thanks, Kelly. Nice to see you all. There is immense power when a group of people with similar interests get together and work towards the same goal. Idowu Koyenikin. Tonight, thank you all so much for coming. My name is Emily Zotto. I work at the middle school here in Swampscott, and Superintendent Angelakis and all of the Swampscott Public Schools share in the commitment for all of our learners, students and staff alike, to learn and to grow, and tonight to share in the joy of our community and all coming together. I'd like to welcome, thank you very much for all your families, students, your neighbors, your grandparents, whoever is here, to come watch our students. We are so proud in having conversations with you all in the atrium tonight, hearing about your graduates from here, students who used to be with us that are in South Korea, in Spain, in Rhode Island. We're hearing the coolest stories about our graduates who are truly our future, which is now. Thank you so much. I'd like to now introduce our Swampscott Middle School Chorus and Director Jen Bowler, who has been working with our 7th and 8th grade chorus members at the middle school for months on this piece, and our middle school and high school band that's working together on a piece tonight. Again, worked so hard, so please welcome both our middle school chorus and our middle school band. Thank you so much.
Such
Thank you very much to the Swampscott Middle School Chorus and the Swampscott Middle and High School Band. That was truly inspiring. Our next speaker is Town Administrator Sean Fitzgerald, here to say a few words.
Wow. Let's hear it again for the middle school band. Unbelievable. Stand By Me. That is an awesome selection. We need to stand by each other. We are in the midst of change that we deserve, change that really does bring challenges, but we have to be comfortable with dealing with the reality that change is difficult. We have a community right now that is doing so many extraordinary things. I want to thank our police and fire departments for working with us to build a more inclusive community. Over the last 3 years, we worked hard to get Swampscott out of civil service. Now, civil service is a system where most cities and towns hire their police officers and firefighters. This system allows people to take a test and you look at a number and you get to rise to the top of your list. But we said we wanted more insight into who the people were, because over 30 years we had hired just one black firefighter who's now our chief. One of the most extraordinary professionals I've ever met and worked with. But just over the last 18 months, we've hired dozens of incredibly talented, incredibly gifted individuals that have their doctorates. Dr. Ruben Casada, our police chief, one of the most accomplished individuals that we could ever hope to hire. We've hired many individuals that speak different languages and help us really create this sense that we're changing for the better. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of Swampscott. But I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that there are forces underfoot that are trying to push us back. They're trying to tell us that we're woke. In fact, I've had people accuse me many times of being just woke. They don't look at the budgets that I've managed over the last 6 years. They don't recognize that for 5 years in a row we hadn't had a tax increase, leveled it. We're building a $100 million school, buying a Hope oceanfront restaurant, and helping to create open space and do things that are important. But the most important thing that I believe that I have been able to achieve over the last 6 years is trying to establish a sense of community. 3 years we've been celebrating Black History. Just 3 years. Unbelievable that we've been doing it for 3 years, but unbelievable that it's just been 3 years, right? Because we should be celebrating this for centuries. We've had a Pride celebration for 5 years. Started with literally 3 people during a pandemic and started to grow. And it's starting to create this sense of community. We've got to do more, though. We need more people to pay attention. I need young citizens to really believe that your future can be changed by the values that we share. I love the quote that was read earlier. I'm going to read one too. Change will not come if we wait for some other person, or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones that we have been waiting for, and I will tell you, everything that we are doing is going to improve the quality of life for every citizen in this town. I hope other communities around look at Swampscott and help follow the lead, but certainly difficult, but the most important work that we can do in public life. I want to thank Enzo. I'm sorry, my boys have watched you the last 2 years. They were dying to be here, but they One of them singing in a chorus, and the other two are playing basketball. But I'm so grateful for your words of wisdom and for you to share your talent here. I'm proud that Swampscott can do this. And thank you for being here. I want to thank everybody for making this a priority. Seems like we should be doing this more often. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sean. We appreciate the town's support. Enzo Salon Surin is an award-winning poet, educator, publisher, and social advocate. Author of American Scapegoat and When My Body Was a Clenched Fist, which was the winner of the 21st Annual Massachusetts Book Award. His insights over the years have helped us to embrace diversity and become a more welcoming community. Enzo?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. You know, sometimes you have these dreams that you're talking and you're reading and there's no one in the crowd. I just want to make sure you were here. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight and to be in community with Swampscott. My remarks will go deeper into what I'm going to mention here briefly, and that when we talk about history, history is an interesting concept because we think it's in the past. We keep referring to history as if it's in the past, and we give words to our days like yesterday as if what happened at 11:59 p.m. no longer matters at midnight or 12:01 a.m. The difference in what separates those is just minutes, seconds, but it's also the distance that separates us as well. And I'm sure the parents in the room can attest to the fact that yesterday your child was yay high, and today you're buying all new clothes, new shoes, and they're eating you out of house and home, which is what's happening with me and my two boys and watching them grow. It's important that we start this conversation talking about kids. They are literally the future, but the future is also a word that we have for what's to come. They're here now, and they're witnessing the way that we're treating the world, and they're witnessing how we're treating each other. And they're thinking, adults are modeling exactly what I should be like whenever I get to be their age. And according to my boys, I was born in the 1900s. Now, yes, okay, I get it. Technically, yes, but they make it sound so old, right? But there's so much about our experiences that we can share right now with our kids, and I think it's important because we think they don't understand what's going on. I'm going to get, again, deeper into this topic later on tonight in my remarks, but I want to start with a poem to open this up, and it was a question that was posed to me by my 10-year-old son. Then he was only 8, and he walked up to me out of his bedroom just upset about something, angry about something. And I told him, take a deep breath and just talk. And he says, why do firemen hate black people? And I had no idea what he meant. We're in the midst of Black Lives Matter and so forth, right? So there was contention, once again, between police and black lives. But he said, firemen. And so I said, what do you mean by that? And so he opened the door, and he happened to be watching a video that was assigned to him by his class on Martin Luther King, because it was Martin Luther King's birthday, so they were doing this little report. And so he was watching protests, riots, and so forth, right? But then he was also watching these marches, and he saw hoses. He saw water gushing out of these hoses and slamming people against the wall, including kids. Now, I know history, We know history. I never really asked that question. I always focused on the police and everything, that interaction, but he said, why would the firemen do that? And I said, that's a very good question, because the police, I understand, law and order, but there was no fire. So why were they there with the hose? And so he opened up my eyes, and this is someone who's been writing about this topic for such a long time. And he seemed frustrated, and I said, you know what, I am writing a book right now about this. And he said, whew. And that was probably one of the best things ever hear from a child, to feel like the weight of the world was not on his shoulders in that moment. And so this is a poem I wrote out of that experience to open up our conversations tonight. When history returns as a 400-year-old scapegoat. My youngest son at 3 tells me, "You're welcome," when I tell him I love him. He's not wrong. It's much easier to love when one has somebody to love. Love is a muscle, so I thanked him for allowing me to flex it. He is young, and one would think he's not able to choose, but he's not wrong. One time, we watched a show together about penguins and how much was made about their ability to mate for life. They can't fly away, I thought, as if freedom is based on the ability to have a choice. My 7-year-old asked why firemen used to drown black boys, why they aimed their hoses until a young black body stopped moving. This was after watching a short film on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The film included King's speech and some photos of hydrants overflowing with rage towards a crowd, children among them. This was for school. He was given proof for celebrating King's birthday. They couldn't get away, he said. Why would they do that to blacks? The police and their dogs were obvious choices, keep the peace in riot gear. But there were the firemen and their long hoses, and hospitals, doctors who swore an oath to break an oath wrapped up in an enigma. There were pastors and bishops and priests who taught us about a white savior who offered the other cheek. They left out he also flipped tables, and how blood poured from his pores from threat of persecution, and how true salvation must be one's choice. This is called sin of omission. But sometimes I forget about forgiveness and how it is a personal choice. And I forget about atonement until a question is asked that I can't answer without first talking about the chains and the trees and the ropes and cameras, and how history is being rewritten on ledger made of freshly born flesh. And sometimes, being Caribbean-born and Black American, I forget it's winter. Sometimes I forget it is winter in America. Sometimes I forget it's winter in America and I'm not welcomed. Sometimes I forget it's winter in America and I'm not welcome to be the master of my own decisions. Sometimes I forget it is winter in America and I'm not welcome, and choice is an illusion. Sometimes I forget when it is winter. In America, choice is always an illusion, and it always comes back to having to answer questions for which my body is never prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Enzo. Always very thought-provoking. Next up, we have a dynamic student from Swampscott High School's class of 2024, Abube Ehikwe. Thank you very much, Abube. That was amazing. Next, we have, in place of Dr. Nancy Schultz, who couldn't be with us tonight, we have Jonathan Lehman, Vice Chair of the Swampscott Historical Society. One of Jonathan's many jobs is to make sure the exhibits in Town Hall are wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Dr. Schultz came down with a terrible cold this afternoon and can hardly speak, so she regrets she can't be here to deliver this herself, but I will deliver it for her, and it's in the first person, so whenever I talk about I, it's really Nancy that is speaking. Thank you to the S.U.R.E Diversity for this invitation to speak at this year's celebration of Black History Month in Swampscott. It's an honor to be invited back, and especially to share the stage again with the exceptionally talented poet Enzo. Greetings to all the presenters. I was asked to provide some historical context for the event's theme, Our History is Black History. Last year, I offered brief remarks suggesting that in Swampscott, Black history is also the town's history. Both these titles suggest that despite our well-intentioned efforts, Black history remains somewhat obscure within the borders of this seaside town. So how can we make Black lives more historically visible in Swampscott? The first step, it seems, is to uncover this history. Swampscott made the separation from what I like to refer to as our mother city, Lynn, in 1852. And in the colonial days, the entire area was known as Saugus. From the beginning, Swampscott was an independent neighborhood in its location, with the name being used from colonial times. Within these intertwined histories, there were several well-known Black historical figures and many lesser-known ones who passed through the town's borders. We also can learn a great deal from recovering the lives of lesser-known people whose stories merit telling. But let us begin with two prominent 19th century African-American figures. Lynn resident Frederick Douglass, who was born in 1817, died in 1895, is principally known as an anti-slavery activist and a celebrated orator. Salem's Charlotte 410 Grimke, born in 1837 and died in 1914, is honored for her accomplishments in education and writing. Frederick Douglass escaped from slavery in Baltimore during 1841 and moved to Lynn, Massachusetts. Between 1841 to 1848, he lived at three locations: Harrison Court, Baldwin Street, and Newhall Street. Douglass rose to fame through his best-selling autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, written in Lynn and published in 1845. Following the success of his autobiography, he embarked on a tour of Europe and returned triumphant to Lynn. A biographer wrote, late in April, a reception was held in the Lyceum Hall in Lynn, his hometown, and numerous speeches congratulated him on the success of his philanthropic mission. Charlotte 410 Grimke moved to Salem from Philadelphia in 1854 to attend the Higginson Grammar School, a private academy for young women. She was the only non-white student in a class of 200. The school offered classes in history, geography, drawing, and cartography, with special emphasis placed on critical thinking skills. After Higginson, Fortin studied literature and education at the Salem Normal School, the predecessor of today's Salem State University, which began as a teacher training academy. And Dr. Schultz is a retired professor from Salem State University. She was head of the English department there. Fortin's first teaching position was at Epps Grammar School in Salem. She was the first African American hired to teach white students in a Salem public school before the Civil War. She mentions visiting Swampscott twice in her journal, which runs hundreds of pages. Tomorrow, on February 28th, Salem State University will be dedicating the newest residence hall in her name. Alonzo Lewis has a section in his 1830 book, The History of Lynn, including Nahant, that offers some tantalizing details about the lives of some early enslaved people in Lynn. I think it's important that their names be heard. In its pages, we learn that in 1675, Domingo White, a slave in Lynn, had a wife and 2 children. Simon Africanus, in 1714, had a wife and 6 children. One of Zacchaeus Collins' 4 slaves, a man named Prince, was purchased in Boston in 1746 for $75. He married Venus, a slave in the Gould family. Joshua Cheever freed an enslaved woman named Gift in 1756, fulfilling a condition of marriage set for him by his wife, Hannah Perkins, during their engagement. Thomas Cheever's 2 slaves, Redding and Jane, were married in 1760. 2 of Samuel Johnson's slaves, Adam and Dinah, married in 1766. An enslaved man named Hannibal is singled out as especially industrious. He worked extra hours for Ebenezer Hawes to purchase the freedom of his 3 children and his wife Phoebe at $40 each before Hawks granted Hannibal's own freedom. Their recognized marriage in 1762 produced 3 sons and 6 daughters, of whom Lewis wrote, "I have seldom known a more worthy family." Other sources fill in more detail about early black people in this area, some of whom were said to have royal African blood. An article from the New England Historical Society tells us from about 1750 to 1850, New England had at least 31 elected black kings and governors, nearly all of them enslaved. Election Day began with the Puritans as a jolly secular holiday, with important families hosted Election Day celebrations. They served rum and gingerbread and fruit-studded election cakes. Election Day also became a holiday for enslaved people. According to Salem diarist William Bentley, African bondsmen and servants were too restless at home to be of any use till the election holidays were over. This celebration of the first black self-governance was practiced beginning in 1741. Astonishingly, 35 years before America's independence was declared and the Constitution was adopted. The New England colonies, which included New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, formed and embraced the democratic system of black self-government called Negro Election Day. The first celebrated Election Day was May 1741 on the Saugus River in Massachusetts. The practice would soon expand through the rest of the New England colonies. For New England's African slaves, Election Day meant a rare break from toil and a chance to poke fun at their white enslavers. They could express pride in their African heritage and could elect black kings and governors to maintain their own rules of discipline among the slaves. Prince Pompey was a man from Ghana, West Africa, known to be of royal blood. Taken captive in Ghana, he was sold into slavery to Daniel Mansfield of Saugus, Mass, during the Atlantic slave trade. Slavers had captured and sold him, but his enslaver freed him when he grew too old to work. Pompey then moved to a little glade near the Saugus River. Every year, he hosted a holiday for the African bondsmen from nearby towns. Women picked flowers to crown old King Pompey, and the men sat and talked about happier times on the Gambia River in West Africa. King Pompey used his black king status to serve as mediator and liaison between slaves, elected colonial leaders, and white slave owners. Pompey and his court held trials where they deliberated punishment for non-law-abiding slaves in their communities. Emily Murphy, in a 2020 essay, African Americans at Saugus Iron Works, suggests that Pompey was a tailor or worked in cloth. He disappears from the record after 1787. As you are likely aware, the Swampscott Historical Commission is working hard to save the home of General John Glover at 299 Salem Street from demolition. Dr. Schultz has an article on the Glover House that will be published in the spring edition of American Heritage Magazine. So be sure to read that next copy to see the article about the Glover farmhouse. Glover formed the first integrated regiment in the armed services with his seafaring men of all races and ethnicities, including African Americans, as seen in this iconic painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware. African Americans, estimates run as high as 5,000, fought in the American Revolution and in every American war since. But you may not realize that the British Navy also conscripted black mariners to fight for them. Cato Foster, a 33-year-old black man from Marblehead, was in the Royal Navy when the war broke out. According to W. Jeffrey Bolster in his book Blackjacks, Foster and at least 6 white shipmates delivered themselves up as prisoners of war rather than fight their own countrymen. Following the war, the obscuring of black lives unfortunately continued, and this description in the 1800 census illustrate. It records simply, Alexander, a black man. Last year, we discussed Enoch Reddington Mudge and the story of the black family he purchased for $1,500 in New Orleans, the enslaved Stephen J. Freeman and his family. For this year's presentation, I was able to do more research into Stephen and what became of him after he was free. Freeman was just a few years older than Mudge, having been born in Stafford County, Virginia in 1809. Mudge engaged with the Freemans to help with the 130-acre farm in Swampscott, which he had purchased in 1843. The Freeman family worked for Mudge for nearly 8 years. Mudge then released them from bondage, and the family remained in Lynn. Here, we have a census showing Stephen Freeman family living in Lynn in 1850 and 1855. He is in the 1880 census, still living with his wife. Vital records confirm that he died in Ipswich on August 13, 1885, at about 76 years of age of dropsy. And drop C is like heart failure now, or edema. The death record states that he resided in Lynn. Freeman outlived Mudge by almost 4 years and possibly attended his burial service at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. It's likely that his descendants still live in Lynn today. The Swampscott Historical Commission is committed to uncovering the lives of all members of our community. We are proud of our work uncovering the history of 3 Boynton Street in Swampscott, connected to the Green Book. 3 Boynton was the only house on the North Shore listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book for 15 years, a place where black travelers could safely stay. The commission gave this house a preservation award and plans to continue this type of research in a quest to make all lives visible in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's extremely fascinating. The Swampscott String Quartet are members of the North Shore Chamber Music Society. They reside in Swampscott and Marblehead and will share music composed by Joseph Boulogne, Le Chevalier de Saint George. Boulogne was born in December 1745 in Guadalupe. His mother, Nanon, was an enslaved African. His father was a wealthy plantation owner. As a child, he was brought to France and became known as the Black Mozart, a renowned violinist, composer, symphony conductor, as well as an excellent swordsman. He died in June 1799 at the age of 53. The musicians are Rachel Sheryeva and Rome Posgay on the violins, Kate Hewig on the viola, and Mara Richardson on the cello. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Next, we'll bring up Enzo for another round of inspiring poetry.
What a wonderful way to usher in these remarks tonight, and the beautiful, it was incredible. Thank you. To know that someone who's Caribbean born composed this type of music for me to hear this many years later, it means a lot. But it's also a history that was almost buried. And so tonight, my remarks are under the title of Delights Not Often Kind. Now, as Haitians, we have a saying, "Un parler" means let's talk. But if we really want to get intimate in terms of a conversation, we say "un causer." Sounds very intimate. So tonight we're going to have an intimate conversation about what we mean by Black history is our history. Being Black, meaning having a conscious sense that one is Black, is always having a version of oneself in mind that is at odds with the public perception of Blackness, which seems to change from generation to generation. What is Black, what is not Black, and who is Black? And what is American history versus what is Black history. American Scapegoat as a book is not attempting to speak for the entire diaspora that makes up the Black experience in America. I'm trying to provide, though, a brief respite of sorts, one that allows us to say, okay, I don't have to say anything about this particular incident. I can take a break. I don't have to talk about this situation because somebody else is talking about it. You ever been in a position like that where you're just exhausted and just happy that somebody else is saying it, somebody else is doing it? It feels good to rest a bit, but because there's always something, right? There's always something to address at one point or another, and one gets tired. In fact, I wrote this book so that I could have a bit of a break, which is kind of odd because I've been on tour since the book came out, almost nonstop. But I'm having a different conversation than the one that I was having prior to the book being written. And I think because I'm not addressing the same issues over and over, having the same conversations with folks, it's a lot easier. But over time, I too grow, weary of being asked some of the same questions. So I decided to ask them right back in this book. Now, I don't know if the questions posed in American Scapegoat will be answered beyond the tried and true answers that we've always received about race relations in America. But I'm not going to be asking them without seeing or hearing from more than just the usual people, because we typically get the same answers. There are two fundamental questions at the heart of this collection. First one is not so easy. How many times can one ask why they are not seen as human beings? And the second question is, why should I be concerned with trying to answer that question when I'm not the one looking at myself with such a gaze? These poems are saying, here is the history. Here's what the future holds, because there is no future that doesn't hold true to the nature of the past. Let me say it again. There is no future that doesn't hold true to the nature of the past. We know as much because here's what the present is telling us. And the truth oftentimes is clearer than ever before. Some of us don't matter like we do in our own imaginations and in the worlds we have forged for ourselves. As Toni Morrison said, there is a master narrative of fiction speaking here that says, this is what is beautiful, and you are not it. Think about what that means. I mean, really think about it, especially as it relates to our community. If someone says, this is what Swampscott is, and you are not it. Now, you might do an inventory and try to determine whether or not that is true. You may even ask around and want to collect names and want to know who would dare say something like that to anyone in our community. But the answer is not a who, the answer is a what. So let me save you some time. Because it's overt, right? But it's not in the way that we think. I want to start with a poem here titled Elegy for the American Dream to illustrate this point. Has anyone ever seen these billboards that say, if you lived here, you'd be home now? Yeah. So after a while, being a poet, we just write about everything. And I thought, oh, let me just write about that. And it turned into this poem, Elegy for the American Dream. When it reads, this could be you, it doesn't mean you. You are not the day of advertisements. You are the dead arrayed in time of Pablo Neruda's The Chosen One, the butt of jokes and machetes. You are not a feature in these stories. You are the withheld sneeze. You are the closed-mouth cough. You are a cup yawn. You are hearsay. The practical omission of first editions and reports, not even byline in the scene of bread and wine. You are an NSEC, not the target of ads that say, if you lived here, you'd be home now. You are a dog's yelp in the back of a truck, soon to be fairy tale as the Hosea of Hyena Ghost. You are at best a funereal hymn, which means your body is a gravesite, and the city in which you orbit is a mass grave to which not everyone in this ad is invited. What does it mean to live the kind of life where you don't necessarily feel like people understand what's happening to you? And when I talk about what it means to be omitted from a community, I'm not talking about people just saying things to you to make you feel that way. If you don't see yourself reflected in a community, then you are forced to reconcile with that type of omission. You begin to feel like you're not an integral part of the community. You live here, but you are not part of this life or this community. You don't see events catered to you, except maybe when it's Black History Month. You don't know about the Black history of Swampscott unless Nancy or another scholar tells you about it. There are no markers, celebrations, induction citations that says this is our history. For Black history to be our history, it must be named as such. It must be practiced as such. I mean, where are the houses marked, hey, someone who lived here was named so-and-so, this is who their family was. I mean, we saw that tonight on the monitors there, but when do we see that in public? When do we have such conversations? One of the best messages I received this month was a text I was sent by a dear person close to me, and they said, congratulations. And not knowing what they said, I thanked them, and I said, what are you congratulating me about? And they said, oh, you don't know that your quote is on Linshore Drive. It's on that, the traffic message board right near the ocean. I was like, that's my spot. I walk there all the time. They're like, yeah, your quote is up there. And it was news to me. And so as soon as the boys got off the bus, I grabbed them a snack. I brought some snacks with me and some juice boxes. Like, we're going to go down to the ocean. So we went down there, had a dance or two. And we danced around. And I kind of watched how much they enjoyed seeing my name up in lights. And then I recognized that it was my full name up in lights, which means they saw their last name up there as well. And then you think about the thousands of people that drive down that road right on the corner, on the border of Swampscott and Lynn. I kept thinking about how they're saying, yeah, these are Daddy's words, and look at all these people driving by. I was extremely proud in that moment, and I got to watch them and celebrate with them. But the thing is, the announcement didn't need to be made about me being black. Because I'm black, but the quote is not black. I didn't make that quote to be black either. And what I'm getting at here is that even though it was done in recognition to kick off Black History Month, it was my words that mattered. The thousands of the people who were driving by, they felt inspired. Even some of my friends were like, "Oh, that's my favorite quote of yours. I love when I go to your website and I see it." And all of a sudden, we start to have these conversations about what we mean by, for Black history to be our history in Swampscott, Black stories need not be solely Black stories. They need to be our stories too. They need to be someone from Swampscott. I love being in Swampscott. I love when someone says Swampscott poet. I don't want to see Swampscott's black poet. I know I'm black, but my presence here says that I'm part of this community. And that's why we should celebrate. We should celebrate everyone who's in this community. And when I say our stories, I don't mean by, appropriating each other's stories or try to tell it. No, I want us to be more conscious about saying this came from us, to have the level of pride that we have for each other, that this is a Swampscott thing. It's one of those things in the community, if something goes down in the community, you want to be able to say, wait a minute, this is not like us. Who did this? Who said this? And it doesn't matter what the color is. It doesn't matter what their background is, because we want to represent something different. I love going to Pomona Grill right around, right across the ocean there, because the wonderful manager there always greets me. Pablo comes in, greets me says, hey, there you are. He actually even texts me when he doesn't see me in his restaurant, which I thought was odd at first, but I thought somebody misses me, which means he doesn't see me. Oftentimes I'm walking down the beach and I'm not recognized. No one says anything to me, so you tend to feel invisible. But when I do show up, he says, hey, everyone, this is a fabulous guy. He's a very talented poet. And who wouldn't go to a place like that, right, if that's the way they greet you? But I realize that he's proud because we get to interact in that way. When he sees me, he's so excited, and I do the same for him. And I keep thinking about, okay, this is like home. So when we're talking about being reflected in the community, what we're talking about here is creating what I consider to be mirror moments, where someone can walk through this entire community and see signs of themselves. Imagine you're an athlete and you walk into a campus, they're recruiting you, but you see nothing connected to your sport in that university or college. You wouldn't go to that school. But think about a community that doesn't reflect its residents, all of them. Think about what it makes them feel every single day. I want us to be able to say, this sign right here is our sign. This belongs to you too. You are welcome here. You are a human being as well. In these beautiful and spacious skies, there is love for you here too, and there's a place for you here. I want to read another poem for you. It's titled American Pathos, What It Means to Love. Because oftentimes, I talk about how love is an ability, and oftentimes we don't use it. Not because we can't, but it's a won't. And sometimes we can tell the situations when someone shows love, but they decide to practice it with someone else. And anyone here own dogs? Okay, good. Anyone here kiss their dogs in the mouth? Okay, this is not a judgment, but I'm just asking, right? Because they're affectionate, right? So when that line comes up, it's not judging you. I just wanted you to know that. American Pathos, What It Means to Love. There are more than several ways to love someone. You already know most of them. I've watched you make love to a dog, so to speak, by kissing it on its mouth. So often it becomes a world. And in that world, people like me become beasts, not like cherubims, but something dubbed the foulest creature. worthy of only the foulest language that often comes with a foaming of the mouth and a whiteness that parts the white firmament of your eyes with a daub of redness? Is there only room for love in your world save for a neighbor and God and country? Are you willing to give up everything for what you consider to be the highest form of honor and purpose, which is to say, it is a form of godlessness when purity is only for white sheets and deliberate creases? I know you know what it means to love and to greet me with more than a faithless hiss the next time we see each other on the street. Will you meet me with more than grief and rifles and tell me how it feels to forget the heart is its own mirror and what it means to love the version of yourself that sermonizes me as profitable, foul, and sullied? America loves, but it chooses when to show that love. I often hear athletes, top athletes, very popular, cities love them, but they talk about their experiences living in such cities, which is at odds with their public perception. And I think about why we decide to exercise our love with a dog by kissing it on its mouth, and yet a human being doesn't get the same type of love. And it's not from knowing that person because they did something to you, but because we subscribe to something much bigger. And I think it breaks apart our communities when we have something like that. Now, why am I addressing this and saying, is this what Swampscott is like? No, but what is Swampscott like? We're not having those types of conversations. We should be every single day. I remember the first year I read for Black History Month, a student said that they had an interaction with a set of classmates, and the classmate said something about, you need to go home and pick cotton. And I remember thinking how insulting that line was, but in the context of time and place, what did they know about picking cotton? What? And how did they know that would hurt to say something like that? And I keep thinking about there's this idea that history is the past, but there is something we seem to be holding on to. And it has nothing to do with our inability to love, but power, the way we like to wield power over each other, and the way we like to use our words to do that. And I keep thinking about, we are extremely deliberate with words, so it's not ignorance. We know when we hurt. We also know when something is not being said, which sometimes is just as bad. And so as a community, we know better, and as they say, if you know better, we should do better. Why? Because these young people are looking at us and they're saying, you're saying that, so it's okay, or you're doing that, it's okay. And at some point, I keep thinking about, well, what's the purpose of all this? Why write? And what's the purpose of literature? I think any good piece of literature takes into account all these different stories, different degrees of literacy as well. You don't have to be well-versed in history to know what it feels like. You don't have to be well-versed in discrimination. You don't have to have the lingo and the terms even memorized to know when something doesn't look right and doesn't feel right. And to just say, that's not right. There used to be this thing, people were like, that ain't right. They just said it right out loud. And so sometimes we think about that, right? And I want us to appeal to the humanity in each other. And I know how things are, families have different ideas, they have different situations. You don't want to mess up the conversation at the dinner table. And I often think about sometimes how my look and my silence says a lot. Soft-spoken, sometimes I don't even have to say anything. Sometimes I didn't even know I was doing until someone said, hey, you should have checked your face during that meeting. It was saying a lot, because sometimes we just need to let people know, I don't like what you're saying, I don't like what this looks like. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. And sometimes it is about getting up when the conversation is being had. I recognize that they will not continue in your absence because no one wants to talk to themselves about such things. They want an audience. And so we have a way of shifting that. But also bring up literature because we're in the habit now of banning books because history makes us uncomfortable. Because we've never had the conversations, and I think we need to be in community having uncomfortable conversations. We have them all the time. But when it comes to our connection to each other as it relates to our racial history, we don't seem to be doing that. Now, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here when I say that American scapegoat is for everybody. I talk about it in this way because there are many different traditions represented in here. If you love jazz, there's some jazzy poems in there. If you love hip hop, there's that too. If you love classical music, there's few librettos in here. And so whatever it is that you're into in terms of music, you'll find in here, but also subject. Plants, flowers, animals, whatever it might be that your love is, there's something in there as well. So I frame it in that way so that we can actually have an easier conversation. But I'm going to conclude with a poem here because I started by talking about young voices. I think their voices are just as important as telling stories. And that's why when I go into every school, when I do workshops, I encourage and we generate a lot of stories in there because at some point, if they don't like what's being said, they're going to be the ones changing the conversation. And they're not going to wait for permission to do it either. Because I want to make sure that they know their voices can be heard. Different subjects, different points of engagement. The richness of Black history in America is all around us, not just in sports and music, but even when you pull up to the traffic light. Those are basic conversations that we can have, nothing earth-shattering. In fact, it's not even about trying to educate everybody on everything that there is to know. Sometimes it's about stop trying to erase things. Just let things be, right? We know things will surface. Hey, who invented this? I don't know, Google it. And if you Google it, it'll come up. Instead of these lies that we tell, we try to bury things. I think we have this opportunity now to do it as a city, as a town. Sometimes it feels so big, it feels like a huge city. But as a town, we have this opportunity to do it because we're here and we show up every Black History Month. And you'll see me in the community on my bike when it's warmer out for sure, walking with my boys, and I'm always talking with folks, and they're talking with folks. So we're not hiding, but where are the rest of the diversity of Swampscott? When do we gather together like this? And we should do so more often. The poem I'm going to leave you here with is about contributions. And when I talk about omissions, I'm talking about not getting in the way of progress. I frame it in the Avengers because I love fantasy worlds in that way and have superheroes and so forth. But I also think there's so much about this that we can learn from this. But before I read the poem, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. This is not easy conversations, right, to have. But it's necessary as well. Thank you for your attention to my poems as well. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me here tonight, for being patient. Thank you, the youth, for your wonderful voices. It's necessary. But I end with this poem titled American Emblem, the saga of the Black Avenger, because I think by the time we reach the end of this poem, you will say, well, what should we do next? Well, you tell me. At the end of this poem, I'm going to tell you a problem, and you're going to tell me what we're going to do about it. And maybe there'll be a lot more meetings about this conversation, how we're going to change things in terms of making Black history our history. American Emblem, the saga of Black Avenger. In the end, Captain America hands over the shield to Falcon Sam, who feel like he's not worthy of it. He's not your Uncle Sam, but a dapper Black man in a fresh fade and a tight lineup. He's neither comfortable nor is he certain, even in a make-believe universe, with some marvel and grapple with life in realms and portals, about what it means to be a Black Captain America. Not even in the aftermath of a world he helped to bring back from the brink of utter destruction, ash still fresh in his nares. My youngest son wrestles with sleep, wears the emblem of the shield on his t-shirt. He says he doesn't like to sleep, as if he were afraid of an icy 7-year slumber himself. At 3, he has already embodied a spark of what it means for a black man to wear a bullseye on his chest. Sleeping while black is not make-believe. And Sam knows this too as he stares into the distance, between he and the world, as if he's conjuring another word for reverence. The shield's more allegory than metaphor. When Captain was found in that frozen wreckage, his shield and his glory were fully intact, which is to say, America and all of its promises were still his to behold. And Sam knew that. Even after many tours fighting against all enemies, foreign and domestic, black superheroes still need to prove they have to earn their moment. The shield is no different. It's the American way, favor ghosts and legacy over second comings. A rebel spirit is among us, they'll say, and preserve Captain's legacy. Sam knows this wrought arithmetic long held by the empirics, that a 400-year revenge was at hand, so he kept his hands in the custody of his pocket until Bucky, Captain's lifelong friend, nods in his approval. He knows what we all know. Even in the make-believe world of gods and monsters, a black superhero, Captain's wingman, still needs a white sponsor to become a true American hero. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Enzo. It is such an honor for us to have you here. We appreciate you. And you're absolutely right. We do need to have these conversations. And part of what we do at S.U.R.E Diversity is we try to plan meaningful events and things like that and have these conversations. So if you're interested in joining us at some level, we do have sign-up sheets in the back in the atrium. Please let us know, because we would love to hear from you and what you think we should be doing. And we want to thank all the student volunteers tonight. Thank you so much. And Joe Dulett is recording the film team, recording it tonight. So we will have it up on our website, SUREdiversity.org, so that you can see it in the future. And copies of Enzo's books are also out in the atrium. Is that correct? Yes. Available for purchase, and they're wonderful. And again, like I said, please sign up for, we do have a QR code. You can sign up online if you prefer. You can sign up for events just to get notification of these events. You can sign up to get meeting notifications. We do have a meeting on Tuesday, March 12th, and it's at 6 p.m. in the First Church, and we would love to see you there. So hopefully we'll see you again, and thank you so much. Have a great night.